A new physics is emerging to reflect the new discoveries regarding the divine matrix. And we need a new physics because the conventional physics of the past simply cannot explain what the experiments are showing us and what we now know to be true about the universe. In just a few short decades, our view of physical matter shifted from thinking of the atom, for example, as a discrete thing of electrons and protons and neutrons that look like a tiny solar system with planets orbiting a sun. Well, we've gone from that view to a new view of pulsing fields of energy where electrons are places of probabilities rather than things in space and time. Well, it's this shift that's led to the acceptance of the idea that the atom itself is about 99.999999999% empty space. There is no empty space. Nature doesn't like empty. So what appears as the empty is actually filled to the brim with the energy of the field, the Higgs field, the divine matrix, and all the potential that that matrix holds. Well, when we think about this, it's actually really good news for you and me, because what it means is that most of the stuff that makes the universe, as well as the stuff that makes your body and my body, that stuff, beyond the 4% that we know is matter, it's the matrix. And we now know that the matrix is a malleable field of energy. It's a field of energy that changes in response to what we feed that field, and that we have direct access to that field through our user interface of codes like language and emotion. Now, once again, I know this is a very, very different way of thinking about the world and about our bodies. On the one hand, because we are steeped in the story of physical matter and separation. But on the other hand, what I'm sharing with you right now, it is where the leading edge discoveries are taking us right now. So while these discoveries may sound complex, the whole process is actually very simple, the process of how we interact with this matrix. And I want to say to you, in my years, my decades of exploration of the universe and the world and my body as a scientist, I found that nature is actually very simple. Nature is simple, nature works upon simple principles, and it only becomes complex when we make it complex through the words that we use to describe it, or the mathematics that we use to describe it. If you consider the image that you're seeing on your screen right now, on the left-hand side, what you're seeing is a representation of a field of energy that's in motion. Now, in the quantum world, this represents potential. But you can see that the motion is behaving in a very specific way. Can you see on the screen how the energy seems to be imploding? Okay? The energy is moving from outward and it's being directed inward toward the center. If that's not clear to you, the second image on your screen may help to see by comparison. This is also representing energy in the matrix. It's representing quantum possibilities. But can you see what's happening? Can you see how the energy appears to be emerging from a central source and moving outward? And when you look at these two images together, they are a very good, a very accurate representation of precisely what's happening in the divine matrix all around us in our lives all the time. In the field that surrounds us, the field that we are part of. Remember, every atom of your body, every atom of my body, it's not like we're in the field. We are emerging constantly from this field. It's a dynamic state, all right? So if you consider this field that we are emerging from and that we're interacting with, from the perspective of what I'm saying to you right now, all possibilities already exist in this field. All possibilities already exist as quantum potential. It's kind of like saying there really isn't anything new. It's all already been created as potential in the field. All right, so here's what happens. You and I, when we choose to create something new in our lives, when we choose to heal our bodies, when we hold the image in our mind of what it is that we choose to create, the act of holding the image in our minds is the act of us reaching into the potential of this field, of the divine matrix. We're literally reaching in on an energetic level in the presence of all of these possibilities And we're finding the one that we now have created to focus upon. All right, and once we find that, I want to show you what happens. The next image that you see on your screen is also a field of energy. All right, but can you see how this field is different than the other two? The one on the left, the energy is imploding inward. The one in the center now, the energy is emerging from the center. But I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, what's happening to the one that you see on the far right? Is it imploding inward? No. Is it emerging from the center? No. It's pulsing in place. That is the secret to creating in the divine matrix. That's the secret to reaching in to the potential, grabbing that potential in your life and isolating that potential and making it into something that is real. Because what you're seeing right now, the energy that is pulsing in place, that is the energy of an atom. So an atom is a field of energy. It's not imploding inward. It's not emerging out from within. It is vibrating. It's pulsing in place. That is the energy that is represented as physical matter in our world. So now we've gone from quantum potential to physical reality in our world and in our lives. So when we have in our imagination, and there are different ways that we're conditioned to imagine, prayer is a form of imagination. When we are asking for a possibility to be fulfilled in our lives, what we're asking is for the ability to reach into that field of quantum potential, isolate that possibility, our healing or the healing of our loved ones or our perfect relationship or the abundance or success or whatever it is in our lives. What we're doing is we're reaching into that field of potential where all things are in motion, all those possibilities. It's like, oh, there's my perfect relationship. Well, there it goes because look at what's happening. It's in motion. Or there's my healing, but oh, look, well, it's fleeting. Where did it go? Because it's in motion. We are the only form of life that we're aware of right now that are given the gift of consciously, in a moment in time, choosing to reach into this state of energetic potential, to collapse the waves of what is possible into something that is real, and it's represented by the atom in our lives. So another way of saying this, there are different ways of looking at what we're doing. If you're a scientist, what you'd say is that in the field are the scalar potentials, scalar waves. And it's when we reach in and isolate those that they become the vector reality of our lives. Or if that sounds too complicated, what you say is we reach in with the possibility of a wish or a prayer, and the reality is the outcome of that wish or that prayer. When we create in the field, in the matrix, either consciously or subconsciously, what we think of as making something happen is better described as us choosing an outcome that already exists in a field of many possible outcomes by collapsing the infinite possibilities of the matrix into the finite experience of a single choice. And that choice becomes part of the 4% of the universe that we see as physical matter. This is where language comes in. The words that we choose are the codes that direct our neurons to reach into the field of all possibilities, into the quantum matrix, into the divine matrix, and once again to collapse those many potentials into the single discrete experience that we have chosen in our lives. So the question becomes, what language are you using? What language are you using to direct your relationship with the divine matrix? What words do you use in your conversations, in your interactions with people day in and day out? Do you use your words consciously or are they unconscious? Are you saying things subconsciously to the field that you would never intentionally say in a million years? And you know, when you hear things like this, there was a brilliant man that I studied with years ago, Robert Tennyson Stevens, who brought the ideas of conscious languaging forward in the 20th century in a way that had not been done since the time of Benjamin Lee Whorf. And I remember some of the examples that Robert Stevens gave to us and things that we say every day. What if everything that you speak with your words is actually a command to the field? What if every word is a command? Even the things that we say, oh, we're just kidding, or we're just joking. How many times do we say, oh, that really cracks me up when you're laughing about something? Do you really want to be saying that to the field? How many times do people say, oh, this is to die for? I would die for this. Is that really what you want to be saying to the field? I could give you examples, and I do in the books and in a lot of our live interactions in our workshops, of people who have experienced precisely what it is that they're saying into the field. It's very common in the entertainment industry, before someone goes on stage, for the people behind you to say, break a leg. I cannot tell you how many times that has happened to people, and as they're walking onto the stage, or in one case, actually already on the stage, and the speaker literally walked off of the back of the stage, what he thought was solid ground. And I can't scientifically connect that experience of him literally walking off the stage and breaking a leg to what happened behind the stage, but the parallels are so close. So what I have learned to do now, when I'm backstage with myself or my friends, and someone comes up and says to us, break a leg, I'll say, no, heal a heart, and we'll walk out on the stage. And now I'm going to stages where I've never been, and the people backstage are saying to me, hey, heal a heart. So it's making the rounds, it's having an effect, and it's a very, very conscious way of thinking about ourselves. But I'm going to invite you to think about this. Affirmations are very popular in our culture right now. And the idea of an affirmation, I think it can be potentially useful. However, to simply say the same thing a bajillion times in a day may not always have the impact if we're not saying it within the brain state and the heart state that allows what we're saying to be interpreted in a meaningful way by the matrix. In the next episode, we're going to talk about this. But I want to give you some examples. These are common affirmations. I'm not criticizing the authors. I'm not criticizing the affirmation. These people were very well intentioned. But based upon what you and I are doing right now and what you now know to be true, I'm going to invite you to listen to these affirmations and see where they could be stronger. Now, I've chosen, you're seeing them on the screen, these are some cards, popular cards from an affirmation deck. Look at what the first one is saying. New balance is coming to my body now. New balance is coming to my body now. The second one, I'm ready to enjoy perfect health. Or the third one, I am willing to release old patterns and negative beliefs. Let's start with that third one. I'm willing to release old patterns and negative beliefs. If the universe, if the field, if the matrix is hearing that, what is the matrix hearing? The matrix is hearing, okay, you're ready. And you're ready. And you're ready. But there is no outcome. When is it actually going to happen? So the universe says, okay, you can be ready, and you can be ready, and you can be ready. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I am ready to enjoy perfect health. The same thing. The universe says, wow, we're really glad you're ready. That's a good place to be. Let us know when you want it to happen, because it's not in the affirmation. The first one, new balance is coming to my body. If you stop there, it would be open-ended. The first one says new balance is coming to my body now. So there's an outcome. It's happening in the moment. Now you might say these are subtle and that I'm dividing hairs. And what I want to say to you is that our words are powerful. And our words, as you saw in a previous episode, are the result of the compression of the air within our bodies to create the acoustic waveforms that we emit into the divine matrix, and they have an effect. So I'm going to invite you to think about what you're saying to the field. What are you saying to the matrix? And where it makes sense, maybe change up that communication, change up that code just a little bit. I know what I'm saying to you is a very different way of thinking. Once again, it's very different from the way you and I have been led to think about ourselves and our relationship to the world. It's a very different way for science to think about us and our reality. But I also know this, what I'm saying to you, what I'm sharing with you, the leading edge discoveries, the leading edge research, and the rock solid science, it's also the key to the next step in human evolution. We're moving from powerless victims of life circumstances to self-empowered masters of our own internal technology. So what I'd like to do is share an example. This is a story, it's a true story that happened to me when I left the corporations in the early 1990s, and I moved to a piece of land in the high desert of northern New Mexico. And those of you that live in that part of the world, you may remember the 1990s was one of the worst droughts in recorded history. It was terrible. Cattle were dying, crops were dying, people were selling their farms because they could no longer support themselves on the land. And it was during this time that a native friend of mine called me one morning. And to honor his privacy, I'm going to call him David, even though David is not really his name. But David called me one morning and he asked me, he said, "Gregg, would you like to meet me and accompany me to a place that is so old, no one even knows who built this place. It was built by the hands of our ancestors. It is a wheel. It is a circle of stone where we offer our prayers because in this place, the skin between the worlds is very thin." I love that terminology. So he said, "Would you like to join me to offer a prayer of rain?" And I didn't have to think twice. I said, "You bet." And I met David and we hiked into this place. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. As an Anglo, as a Westerner, I expected to see some chanting, some kind of ceremony, maybe some dancing. And what I saw was David. He sat in the ground. He took off his old work boots. He unlaced them and put them outside the circle. He stepped into the circle with his naked feet on the ground. He closed his eyes. He honored all of his ancestors. He honored the directions, all 6 of them. And then he closed his eyes with his hands in a prayer mudra over his heart, just for a few seconds. This is outside of the town of Taos, New Mexico. It's the nearest city of any size. And he looked at me. He opened his eyes and he looked and he said, "I'm hungry. You want to get a bite to eat?" And he was inside the circle. And I said, "Well, yes." I said, "But I thought you were going to pray for rain." And he looked at me and what he said has stayed with me so powerfully for so long, and it's helped so many people when they think about how this prayer works. He looked at me and said, "No." He said, "If I prayed for rain, rain could never happen." He said, "Because the moment I pray for rain, I have just told the universe that rain does not exist here. The moment I pray for it to happen, I'm acknowledging that it's not here now." And I said, "Well, if you didn't pray for rain just now," I said, "when you close your eyes, what did you just do?" And he said, "When I closed my eyes," he said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like when it rains in my Pueblo village." He said, "I felt the feeling of what it feels like to stand with my naked feet in the mud, and the mud is there because there's been so much rain." He said, "I smelled the smells of what the rain smells like when it rolls off the earthen walls from our Pueblo, and I felt what it would feel like to walk through the corn that's this high against my naked chest, and it's this high because there's been so much rain to grow the corn, and then I give thanks of gratitude and appreciation for the rain that has already happened." He's brought together so many of the concepts. He's acknowledging that there's a field out there, number one, that he's communicating with that field. He's acknowledging that the feeling is the language that the field recognizes. It's not so much about the words. The words can be spoken. However, if the words are spoken, the goal is to create the feeling, all right? And he's acknowledging that he has the potential as a man, a human, in the presence of this field to reach inside of the field into the realm of all things that are possible and isolate the possibility of his choice and collapse that potential into something real in our world. And he's doing it through a very sophisticated internal technology that we call the lost mode of prayer. It is a feeling-based prayer. The key, feeling as if the prayer is already answered. David and I went into Taos, New Mexico. We had lunch about an hour south of where this prayer was offered. By the time I got back onto my land, something began to happen that we hadn't seen in a long time. Big black clouds came in over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It started to rain, and it rained. And it rained and rained and rained. It rained all that night. It rained the next morning. It rained the next afternoon. It rained and rained. It rained so much the ground was so dry it couldn't absorb the rain, and everything began to flood. Fields were flooded. Cattle were stranded. Roads were washed out. And I called my friend on the phone. I'm just going to share this with you. I called my friend on the phone and I said, "David, man, this is a mess." I said, "What is happening?" And he was quiet just for a moment. And he said, "Gregg, that's the part of the prayer our ancestors could never figure out." He said they could tell it to rain, but they couldn't tell it how much to rain. So I cannot prove to you scientifically that David's prayer had anything to do with the rain that came in that afternoon. I cannot prove that to you as a scientist. As a scientist, what I have to say is there's a high correlation between the rain that appeared that hadn't been seen in a long time and what David had just done hours earlier. When we talk about these things, some of these are anecdotal stories, but they're illustrating from an indigenous perspective a very powerful concept. Look at what David did. He incorporated all of his senses. He didn't ask for something to happen. He felt it had already happened. He smelled what it smells like when it happens. He heard the sounds of the rain. I didn't even tell you about that part, but he heard the sounds of the rain. And he felt as if that rain is already there. I'm going to invite you to think about this as we go into this modality of prayer that I'm going to share with you. So the principles that I'm sharing in this mode are very simple. They're also very ancient. And everything I'm saying to you, we see the instructions for this kind of prayer, for this code that allows us to speak directly to the matrix. We see these principles recorded in some of our most ancient, cherished spiritual traditions. And I'm talking about lost biblical books that I described earlier in this program. These are the books that were discovered in the mid-20th century as the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt. Remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest records of the Old Testament. The Nag Hammadi Library are the oldest records of the New Testament, both of them found in the mid-20th century, the 1940s. And in that Nag Hammadi Library, the 43-plus books that were completely removed from the biblical canon in the 4th century by the Emperor Constantine were intact in the Nag Hammadi Library, including the Gospel of Thomas that we've spoken about earlier. Thomas the scribe, that followed the Master, Jesus, the teacher, not a religious man from this perspective, but he followed the teacher, and he recorded the words, the exact words of the teacher. And this is important because there is a place in the Gospel of Thomas where his students asked the teacher how to communicate with the field. They didn't use those terms. They asked how to communicate with God. And it's in the Gospel of Thomas that we find the instructions for the fifth mode, the lost mode of prayer. So it's in the Gospel of Thomas that we actually find the instructions for this fifth or this lost mode of prayer, as I mentioned. So let me first read to you the translation in the authorized version of the King James Bible as we see it today. If you'd like to see this for yourself, it's in King James Version. The book of John 16 through 23 is where you would find this. I know you've heard this before. How many of you have heard, ask and ye shall receive? That's where this comes from. But let me read you the translation. The translation goes like this. Whatsoever ye ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Ask and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full. Okay, and that's the end of the translation. I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I would ask and ask and ask, and not much would happen, and I became very frustrated. Many people do. And we feel powerless. We feel that our prayers really aren't making any difference because we're not seeing any way to reinforce that our prayers have actually done something. They've made a difference. But we're going to go back into the original Aramaic translation, and Greek and Aramaic both, but this is going to be from the original Aramaic. In the Gospel of Thomas, you see Greek and Aramaic, is why I'm clarifying this. And I want to read you, and it's very close, but there's a powerful and subtle difference that was left out in the translation, and it may very well be because the translators did not understand what you and I are exploring right now. Because they didn't understand it, they simply streamlined the languaging. So, in the translated version, and if you'd like to see this for yourself, it comes from Neil Douglas Clotes, is the name of the translator. There's a little book called Prayers of the Cosmos. It is a beautiful, beautiful book where he retranslates so many of the very powerful prayers, and this is one of them. Now listen to the difference. In the original text, it begins a very similar way. Quote, all things that you ask straightly, directly, from inside my name, you'll be given. Okay, now here comes the translation that was in error. This is the original. Ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full. That is a single, very powerful statement. I'm going to break this down. Ask without hidden motive. That is inviting you to ask without attachment to the outcome. It's actually a very Buddhist concept. Ask without attachment to the rightness, the wrongness, the goodness, the badness, or the joy or the disappointment as to whether or not your prayer is answered, without attachment to the outcome. Okay? Be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire. The only way to be is if those things are already present. Your prayer is already answered. You're coming from the place that the prayer has already been answered. So the key to what we're saying here, feel the feeling. Feel as if the prayer is already answered with as many senses as you can. Smell, touch, taste, hearing. Feel as if your body is already healed. Feel as if your perfect relationship is already present. Feel as if your abundance is already present. Invoke all of those senses. Earlier in this series, I suggested a new model for creation and the way that it works, and a new philosophy that says that our creation, that consciousness, is constantly informing us of ourselves through our creations. The things that we create, art, music, books, the things that we create that we believe are entertainment or creative expression, in addition to those things, that they are actually us informing us of ourselves, informing us of our relationship to the field, so that we can remind ourselves of this very powerful internal technology. Prayer is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. Now, I'm going to do this in a very condensed format to give you the sense for what I'm saying, and then you can take this idea and you can apply it in your own prayers. I'm going to give you a template to do just that. I worked in the corporations and as a scientist, as a senior computer systems designer during the Cold War years. I understand computer systems really well. And one of the things that amazed me is no matter how complex or how simple they are, whether we're writing 3 million lines of code, which happens with some of the systems that are being used in the research industry, or just a couple of lines of code, the programs will always follow the same template. Here's the template. There is always an introduction that tells the program what is about to happen. They're called declaration statements. Then, following the declaration, there is the work, the body of the program that's actually doing the calculations. And then there is a close, something to bring the program to closure. All right? That is the way the most sophisticated computer systems in our world work today. If we are building in our world, if consciousness is informing us in our world, something we know and need to know about ourselves, then the question is it possible that those most sophisticated computers can be telling us something about the way we communicate with the matrix? The answer is yes. The template that allows the most sophisticated computers and the way to work the way it works is precisely the template that allows your prayers to work the way they work. And your prayers, when you build your prayers, I'm going to invite you to do precisely this. The first statement of your prayer, a declaration statement. Tell the field, tell the matrix, tell consciousness, tell God what it is that you're about to do. In a single phrase or a brief sentence, be concise. You can simply say, this is a prayer of healing for my body, or a prayer of healing regarding my loved ones. And then in the code, what is it that you want to happen, but come from the place that it's already happened. Give thanks for what has already occurred. I give thanks for the perfection of my body, for the healing of my body, for the healing of my loved ones, for the healing of my relationship. All right? This is the body of the code. The closure, so beautiful and so powerful. In the closure, we're telling the field that it's already done. And for the closure, the texts invite us to use the original Aramaic. The original Aramaic, there's something about these words. Let me share them with you. The words La Alam, Amin, Amen. La Alam, Amin, Amen. At the end of your prayer, what does that mean? It means, I seal this prayer in trust and faith and truth. Amen. I can't think of a more powerful, more sophisticated, more beautiful technology that has been left to us than our ability to communicate with this field in a meaningful way. And I've just shared with you one template. There may be others. This is a very powerful template that was left to us 2,500 years ago that allows us to do just that. The bottom line of everything I'm saying to you is through the fifth mode of prayer, our feeling-based prayer, we are given the ability to communicate directly with the possibilities that exist in the universal field, in this divine matrix, and to do so in a language that the matrix recognizes. Our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have preserved the knowledge and the technique to interact with the divine matrix and for us to rewrite our personal as well as the global reality code. If an elevated magnetic field can bring about peace and cooperation in response to a tragedy, can we do it without the tragedy? And the answer is yes. We're doing it all the time. Now, what I want to show you right now, this is a snapshot of the random number generator. Right now, I think there are 21 random number generators live, and at lunch, I was able to link into the server at Princeton. And if it is still running, I've got it in the tray. If it's still running, we can see this live. You want to see it? Let's see what this looks like. So here's the static image. And what you're seeing is, as they become less random, you're going to see these things spike. Let's see if I can get this up here. So right now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 21 of the random number generators that are live right now. They're sending back information. They're picking this information up. They're in resonance with the field. In the field of our planet, there is apparently no big one thing happening, and everybody's kind of doing their own thing. If a spaceship landed on the lawn of the U.S. White House, just saying, or maybe a spaceship landed on the lawn of every capital of every nation simultaneously, and it was televised, and the whole world saw it, what you would see is the randomness would go away. And it will become more ordered because we are focused on this event. It's showing that consciousness is literally, not a metaphor, it's literally linked to the field of the planet that we live on, the magnetic field. This opened up a whole new arena of research. Now, this is Princeton University. It's called the Global Consciousness Project. All right? So I'm going to go back. Isn't that cool to see this? Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. We just got access to the server so we can see. So each one of these is numbered, and that number links to a location. I don't know where the locations are. And these are readings that are coming up, 0.5, 0.3, 0.2. There was a spike. Something happened right there. So there are locations where people are becoming more ordered, less random. There are experiments that are done where I've actually participated in experiments where we've led global meditations or global prayers, and it's been reflected on what you see right here. The Institute of Heart Math, now that you're experts and familiar with heart math, took that information, it took that data, and asked a question and formed a hypothesis. Here's the hypothesis. The thinking is that strong, collective human emotion, you're the only form of life that can consciously influence the magnetics of the planet you live on to create peace and cooperation when you need it the most. No other form of life can do that. Here's the hypothesis. Strong collective emotion has a measurable impact on the geomagnetic field of the Earth. It does. That hypothesis led to this project. The project is called now the Global Coherence Initiative. So it's gone from a project to an initiative. I'm proud to say I'm on the steering committee of this project. I support it. I believe in it. It's under the radar, so it's not regulated by any government organization. The military is fascinated, but they are not being given. They're given the data, but we want to keep this independent. We don't want this under the auspices of a federal organization or anything else. It's an independent, first of its kind study. Let me show you the statement of purpose. The Global Coherence Initiative, or GCI for short, it is the first science-based initiative ever designed for this sole purpose. The only purpose is to unite millions of people from varied beliefs and cultures and backgrounds and religions and spiritual traditions to shift global consciousness from instability and chaos to balance and cooperation. Never has a science project, they've done it as a side, never has the money been spent and the energy and the time and the technology and the expertise to develop a system to facilitate cooperation on a global level. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, can you feel that? I can feel it when I say it. Now, here's how it's happened. It's a two-phase program. The thinking is very simple, and this is why what you did is so powerful beyond your body. Global coherence, so personal, where is it? Right there. Personal coherence leads to social coherence. It does. When you become coherent within your being, you influence people in the boardroom. I've done experiments. It's a hoot to see how people in the boardroom, I'm not saying you walk into the boardroom and say, hey, I'm a coherent being, and I expect coherence. I would never do that. But when you carry yourself in coherence into a meeting, the meeting changes, people respond, and usually in a positive way. More willing to work together, better listeners, more willing to cooperate. Happens in the family. Experiments have shown in cities over 10,000 people, hospital room visits, emergency hospital room visits will decline. Violent crimes against people will decline. Crimes will decline while the coherence is in place, and when it stops, all those statistics reverse. So we know that there is an effect. It leads to social coherence, leads to global coherence. Boy, if we ever needed coherence, I can't think of a better time than right now. So look at what's happening. Look at the symmetry. It's only now, when we've reached the close of a cycle of time that was described in our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, when the science is telling us that we are more polarized as a planet than we have ever been, when there is a movement and a struggle for power and control of our thoughts, our beliefs, our history, and our very humanness, and the technology is now available to impose other people's ideas of life upon our bodies. Only now do we have the ability to influence the field that connects all of that thinking. And the way that we do it is by following our most ancient and cherished spiritual principles of returning to our heart in a precise way. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Now, if you don't know that, if you're stuck in this little box, the world looks really scary. But I want to tell you, I've never been more optimistic. I'm a realist. We're going to go through some tough times before we get to wherever it is that we're leading ourselves. But we now have the tools and we're empowered to do it in a healthy way. We don't have to hurt one another. We don't have to lie. We don't have to create fear in young people to get them to think and act and believe in a certain way. We can. We're doing it. It's happening now, and you're seeing what the results are. There's another way. Now, let me show you how this works. This project, Global Coherence Initiative, 2 phases. First phase is we need to measure the fields. Those random number generators aren't the way to measure the fields. There's something else. And number 2, we need to feed the field. We need to positively influence those fields. And we know how, by creating coherence. So here's phase 1. Listening to the magnetic fields of the Earth. Could do it with satellites. They're very expensive. A lot of technology. HeartMath decided to use ground-based sensors. This is very cool. Here's what the first sensor looked like. All right, you can see the people stand by. Look how big this thing is. It's like almost 5 feet tall. But you know what happens with technology? As soon as it's developed, it's improved, usually miniaturized. And we went from this as the first sensor. If you like blueprints, there's what it looked like. These are measuring magnetic fields of the planet. If you like blueprints, here's what the new sensor looks like. And when you install it, it went from this to this. Who wouldn't want one of those in your yard? But you can't go in every yard. There are very specific places on Earth They have to be very quiet places, geomagnetically quiet, tectonically quiet, electromagnetic field influence quiet, not a lot of traffic, a whole lot of parameters, groundwater, a lot of things. This is the first sensor, and this is at HeartMath headquarters. Right now, these are the active sensors, the ones I've circled. There is one in New Zealand that's active, one in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis, the medical community in Saudi Arabia sponsored a site. They wanted to be in on this from the very beginning, and they've been really good partners, the medical community. One in South Africa, one in Northern Europe, there is one in Canada, and there is HeartMath in the United States. The ones that are not circled are sites that are potential sites. All of this is funded only through personal contributions. No grants, nothing is, because we don't want to be beholden to anybody for anything. Keeping it independent, keeping it honest, and that's exactly what's happening. So phase one is listening to the earth. The system works. This is what 1 day's worth of data is showing. The bands that you see are the different striations of the magnetic fields of the earth. The brightness is when it's active. Here's a whole month of data. This is the month of December. The system took Christmas Day off. The system was down for some reason, a couple of other days, but this is a month of data. Phase two is feeding the field in a positive way. Human emotion influences the field, and what we just did in here is how you feed the field. The field only knows chaos or coherence. Here's why this is important. If you want social change and you riot angrily in the streets, are you creating chaos in the field, or are you creating coherence in the field? Yeah, people ask me, and they said, Gregg, why aren't you out there supporting all of the protests? And I said, because if you understand the principles of cooperation and coherence, that is not the way to do it. Buckminster Fuller told us that. You find a better way. There are ways to protest, but it's heart-based protest. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times when, World War II is a perfect example of fighting tyranny that had been allowed to reach such a point. It had to be met with that force. But we now know we don't have to allow it to go that far in the presence of cooperation. Phase two. This was when Barack Obama was elected. The whole world was watching. When that happened, and what you saw was the randomness become much more ordered. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can see the red, you can see the randomness disappeared because people were watching what was happening. Here is the information. Here are the days. The inauguration was on the 20th. So here you can see from in the upper left, 16, 17, 18, 19. There's 20. The red arrow is the inauguration. Look how quiet the field got in the next day right after that. People were in shock. They said, my God, Obama is in. And the field became very quiet. Now, scientists are really cautious. They don't say it's because of this. They say there's a correlation. They don't like to say this made this happen. So as a scientist, I have to say to you, there's a high correlation between the time Obama was inaugurated and the way the field responded. And it's worth exploring. And that's what we're doing right now. All right? Here you can see this was actually on February 14th, 2009, World Sound Healing Day, facilitated by my dear, dear brother and his wife right here in Boulder, Colorado. Jonathan Goldman and his wife, Andy Goldman, Andrea Goldman, facilitate World Sound Healing Day every Valentine's Day. And they teamed up with Princeton to see if there was an effect, and there is, and here it is. The world, during the time of World Sound Healing Day became, I'm just going to give up on the laser. I'm pointing and nothing's happening. Became more coherent, more ordered. Now the question is it the sound? Maybe. Or is it the consciousness and the sound is facilitating that? In other words, would it happen even if there was no sound, if everyone were praying at the same time? That's worth study. That's what we're doing right now. Here it is, so you can see what happened, and you can see the correlations. Random, and this is over the days, February 11th, 12th, 13th, and now we come to February 14th. The randomness begins to go away, becomes more ordered because millions of people are focused on World Sound Healing Day, and look how quiet the field becomes compared. The bright is the noise, and look how quiet it becomes, and it lasts, and then it begins to change and go back to whatever is happening. All this to say that we have the potential to influence the field that connects all life, the field that can create peace, cooperation, and love in our communities, in our societies, in our nation, and between nations on this planet through our soft technology of being pure human. You don't need transhumanism to do that. You're not imposing a field. You could build a machine and you could impose 0.01 hertz in the field, and because just like using chemicals in the body. If people aren't ready to accept that, it's going to be very, very irritating to their system. They'll resist that. But when it comes from within us, and we have become that field, we become that 0.1 hertz. It's a whole different story. So right now, the Global Coherence Initiative, GCI, it is made of people right now in over 104 countries, and that number is probably outdated. Every place you see a heart on this map is a Global Coherence Initiative site where people are feeding the field coherence. Now, one heart does not necessarily mean one person. So in Japan, for example, they have groups that wake up, they work a lot in Japan. They're usually at work by 6 or 7 in the morning. It's 4 a.m. They go into a theater. 300 to 400 people in the theater taking the time to feed the field and love Mother Earth. So people ask all the time, what can I do to create a better world? Rather than reinventing the wheel on your own, if you'd like to join a science-based project that is really well established and well underway, this might be the answer. So I wanted to share this with you in closing today, because what you're now discovering, if you didn't know already, is that while personal coherence is good for you, global coherence is really good for the planet. And every time you create that personal coherence, you are feeding the field. And so one of my practices at the end of every day before I go to bed, I ask the question, what did I feed the field today? And if my answer is not the answer I would like, I don't judge myself. I say, tomorrow, let's do a better job. Because when we feed that field, we're loving ourselves, loving the people of this planet, even those that don't know they're being loved. There's a battle playing out for our story. You know what that is all about. But there's a deeper battle, the ultimate battle for our very humanness. And I made a statement. I said, I'm not against the technology. But once we embrace it, we can't go back, because we will lose the biology that gives us our uniqueness. So before we give ourselves to the technology, how do we know how much of ourselves to give away? Until we know who we are. And my goal, my prayer, my dream in sharing this with you today is that hopefully you have a little bit better sense of what it means to be pure human. It may become a rare aspect of our species if we choose this transhuman path. It may be that the pureness of who we are becomes something that becomes scarce. But I think it's worth preserving, it's worth honoring, it's worth understanding, and if we have to, it's worth fighting for. Because we are the only ones of our kind known to exist. And there's something so precious and unique about us that cannot be replicated through a machine. So this is the ultimate battle. I hope that you felt that this 2 days, it's a celebration of our humanness It is a love story because we're loving ourselves in new and exciting ways. And it's a celebration of the most radical act of power that I could ever invite you to share with me, the radical act of changing the way you think about yourself and your relationship to the world.